So let's get started, and I'll show you a couple things that I've learned. The method that I use, like I said, I learned from Wolff Industries, so I'm following what they teach. That has always worked well for me, so I don't really deviate from that. Now, there are some things you want to make sure you have if you're going to do barber shears. One thing that is important is that you have the proper hones. They Wolff Industries sells these uh, deburring and finishing hones, so you want to make sure you have these, which you can get from them, and a couple other things that are useful. One thing I have, if you're going to be doing barber shears, they sell a special clamp for doing convex shears for polishing the outside edge of the shear. And what happens is this detaches and you can polish the outside edge. And if I have a set of convex shears today, I'll show you what that does. Other than that, let's get started and I'll talk about some of the things that you want to be sure of if you start doing shears, especially barber shears. And there are some things you want to be, certain of when you start doing these. So one thing I would say is definitely practice. Get some uh, shears. If you know, the system that I bought came with practice shears, and what I also did when I was first learning to do shears was I went to my local barber shop, asked them if they had any old shears, and they had a bunch of them because they've been there for like 40 some years. And I offered to sharpen any of their old shears, and told them what I was doing, and they knew I had started a knife sharpening service, and I wanted to get into doing barber shears and scissors, and they were kind enough to lend me. Several of the barbers gave me scissors and shears to sharpen, ranging from very very old that some of them had them for 40 years, and some of them were new, and now they are now one of my customers, and I sharpen all of their shears for them. Um, but what I was going to say is one thing you want to be sure of is make sure you talk to your clients when you get shears in. Don't just take them. Uh, you want to make sure, are they just dull? Is there any issues with them? And I would always check too, because people aren't always going to tell you. And the one thing you want to know for sure, especially what I really like to do is to test them right in front of them when they come in the shop. So I have hair. I use one ply tissue that I wet to cut with shears. And these are all tests that I do after I've sharpened them, but I also like to do them before just to see what's going on with that typical shear that someone's leaving. Now, sometimes you can tell looking at them, whether they're fine. I've had where people have dropped them and they've gotten a chip in them. I have a couple hair salon schools around me that now also send me their students, and but especially if you're doing someone's very high end shears. So keep in mind, some serious salon stylists, they might have scissors that are worth, you know, a couple $100. So you really, this is one of those things that I say, make sure you know what you're doing before you venture into this lane, because if you destroy someone's several $100 pair of shears, they're probably not going to be happy. The small amount you probably charge for sharpening them isn't going to be worth what you might have to pay to replace them if you really mess them up. Now, um, the first thing I do with all shears is I always take them apart and I clean them up. And you want to make sure you keep track of all the parts and where they go. One of the things I found works real good for this is like little pill boxes. So I'll use a pill box to put parts in, and you will over time learn what goes where and how they go because they're pretty standard. So certain things you'll want to take note of. There's always usually a round hole, and then there's one with a boxed end. And The screw goes in the round hole, but if you look at the screw, it usually has a box part on it, and you'll see where that box part fits into, which helps it all clamp down. Now, a lot of shears have washers in them, and sometimes they're clear, and it's very easy to not see the washer. And sometimes they're missing. Sometimes it is stuck to the screw, which not isn't uncommon. So you want to look for that, and there is one here. So you can see this, guys. So there is a little washer. You want to get these and have these parts readily available if you are going to get into doing them. Now they will give you a starter supply of washers from Wolff Industries if you buy the Salon kits. But I've also gone out and sourced other parts for scissors to have them on hand. So this washer is intact. It's on there. It's got one nut. So this is a pretty simple pair. Um, when we talk convex, we're talking, some of them are very, very rounded in the back here. And you want to be, conscious of that. And these look pretty good. They're just very, very dirty. So one thing I do now, this isn't something uh, that I did or learned from Wolff Industries, but I like to clean them up. Just like a lot of times, what you'll see is a lot of gunk and junk where the screw is. So I will get in there and I will just clean these up. And one thing I found works really well is goof off. I have two different strengths. I have an industrial strength and I have just a regular strength, household strength. And that does a good job usually getting any grease or gunk in there out. But I like to get in there and clean that ride area up. Now, the other thing I will caution you to on scissors is I have cut myself more often on scissors than I have on knives. And I do far more knives than I do scissors. But I will tell you that scissors are very, very sharp when they come off of the sharpener. And one of the things that happens is when I'm clean, there's a honing polish that's used. And sometimes it sticks a little bit to the blade. And I have, went in here with a rag to kind of clean that off and cut my finger. So now I rarely ever wear any type of cut gloves, but after cutting myself, maybe 3 times on scissors, I decided enough of that. I'm going to get a pair of cut resistant gloves, and I have a pair that I pull out, and this is pretty much about the only time I do it, but these are my cut gloves. And I will bring these out when I am going to do scissors, basically for just the cleaning part, because I've got tired of cutting my finger literally right through a rag. It will cut right through it. So let's get started. So we're going to go back to our machine, and the first part is just figuring out what the angle is for this barber shear. Typically they run around 25 degrees. But they can vary. There can be lots of variations, and you don't want to get the angle wrong, especially on barber shears, because they it will really show if you took off way more metal or if you cut into that convex edge uh, far more than you should have. So one thing I always do, I still do the marker trick, because the other thing I keep in mind is the angle of your bevel here is very, very tiny, hard to see. So I like to do the marker trick just because that bevel can be so hard to actually see. And so I like to clamp mine. Let's see, hopefully you can see this. I like to clamp mine right around the this piece right here, right through where the screw part is, very close to that screw area. And I like to do it kind of right in the middle of that if I can. And I'm going to start this out at about 25 degrees. And it looks like it might already be set there, is it? No, it's not. All right, so this is 25. So the line on this one, it's kind of odd. It's in the middle of these where these two metal pieces come together. So you just kind of line it up with that edge and then tighten this down. And then we're going to bring this up to the stone. And I am going to just do a nice little light scratch and take a look. And that looks great. It's right perfectly on the apex. The one other thing I'm going to grab real quick is the Ookami Gold Polishing Compound. And I have a whole drawer in my drawers over here. I'll show you in a little bit. That's all dedicated to just scissors. So this is the Ookami Gold white compound, and it goes on this wheel. Now, scissors, barber shears are one of these things that's a little bit odd that they have a particular process that you're supposed to follow. So you cut on the machine, you deburr and finish deburr on the hand hones that I showed you. Then you come back and polish and do a final finishing on here. Then you reassemble them and then test them. Regular scissors, you cut them, deburr them right there on the machine, then do like a paper cut test and do a little bit of separating the blade and deburring there and do cut tests. So this is just a slightly different process. The other thing here that take note of is, and I'm going to zoom in here. I want to make sure I get this as best as we can see it, is that it does not take a lot of cutting with this 800 grit diamond to raise a burr. So I also like to check and see where my blade is, where, make sure I'm not cutting into a part. Like, I don't want to cut in up here because that's not where the cutting part is. I usually kind of mark it with the marker, and I want to make sure I got a nice. So I'm going to start my machine, let it get up to full speed. And it rarely takes a lot of cuts to get a burr. No burr yet, but it looks good. Looks good. And I'm feeling the very beginning of a burr, but I think I'm going to do one more cut. That should do it. Yeah, that feels good. All right. So, like I said, normally on a regular pair of scissors, I'd be going right to honing, but we don't do that with these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my other side. I'm going to set that up for cutting. I'm going to check it and make sure it's the same angle, which it should be. I'm clamping in my same spot, kind of right in the middle, making sure that grabbed well. Bevel line, let me show you. Drawing my line right down that bevel. Like I said, it's very tiny. These bevels on barber shears are small. I mean, they're sometimes really hard to see with the naked eye. Let's check. And once again, it looks great. It's perfect angle. So we're gonna just get the cutting. And let me make sure you guys can see. I'm gonna zoom in a bit here. Hopefully you guys can see this well. There we go. You just want to keep that as flat as you can, and just keep cutting until you get a burr. It's usually not that many. Sometimes it's the first cut, and you get that burr. These are a little dull, so this looks like they're going to be about 3 cuts, maybe. A little bit. I'm going to do one more. And I am not pushing hard. I'm using very light pressure. And now I have a good solid burr all the way across. I am going to touch this tip a little bit here. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to stop that. I'm going to leave this exactly where it is. Now I'm going to come over to those hones I showed you before. Here's the hones. So you start on the burring hone and you finish on the finishing hone. And it's very simple. You're going to start here and you're going to pull back and lift up. So you're going to do this 2 times. This is going to just pull that burr back in the proper direction. Then you're going to do it again, pull, and then you're going to do 5 or 6 passes or so back and forth, just like this. And then you're going to take a look at it. Looks good. And you want to see a nice shiny area around this whole ride area. You want to make sure you hit all of that. And that looks good. So I'm going to move on to my other one. Same thing. I'm just going to pull. I'm going to stop it down the middle, lift straight up, go back. Same thing, lift straight up, go back. And now I'm going to work it a little bit. I want to make sure I get that whole ride area and down the tip. And I'm just using light pressure here. And when I stop, the main thing is I always want to lift straight up. Now I'm going to go to my finishing hone. All right, same thing. I'm going to use light pressure. And this is just a even higher grit. And the main thing, once again, is just when you stop, lift straight up. And one more time. Other one. I'm going to work that good, back and forth. My hone's moving a little bit on me there. That's good. All right. So now I'm going back to my machine. And now we're going to work on the honing side. So I'm going to put this back just like I was cutting it, and in the same way, right through that middle of my shear. Make sure that's nice and even. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to work on the hone side. And I'm going to use a little bit of this Ookami gold polishing paste. And I just need to touch it to it. You'll see the white stuff go on there. That's all you need to do. And you're going to work it from the tip all the way down a few times. I like to give it a chance to cool down a little bit. You don't want to blow it. But this is also where, when I talked about polishing a convex edge, so if you cut into this, it shines this outside area. And this one's not super convex, so sometimes on more of a convex one, you're going to see that where that having this clamp that can articulate and bend a little bit makes a difference. And I'm just going to take a look at that. That looks real good. And this is what I'm talking about. You see that little bit of honing paste that's on there. I'm going to clean that off, But this is where I use my cut resistant gloves because it's where I have cut myself one too many times because these are very sharp at this point. So what I'm going to do is I just make sure I got these gloves on now because that is razor sharp and it will go right through there. Now, this one doesn't need really any polishing, but I'll show you that on this. If I was going to polish it, now, what they say is you can take a penny and put it in here and then kind of move it up and down. I usually just do it by hand, but like so, what they say is you put the penny under there to keep that angle, and then you're just going to go across polish, and you're just going to keep changing that angle till you polish that whole outside edge. And I'm just going to show you a little bit here. So all this is doing is just making this barber shear on the outside edge look nice and polishing that up again. And that's all we had to do there. So I'm going to take that off. And so as you can, it just polished that outside edge there. And I'm just going to clean off again. All right. I'm going to add a little bit of more Ookami gold to the honing side. Same thing with this one. I'm going to put it in like I'm sharpening it first in the same spot. Make sure it's good and tight. And then I'm going to flip it over. And do the same thing. Work it a little bit back and forth. Work that tip area. Let it cool for a second. Thing. Now I'm just going to move right into polishing that outside edge a little. And that should do it. I'm going to release this and take a look at it. And let me see if you guys can see that. So you see this little black stuff from the hone that's what happens with the Ookami gold. It kind of will stick there a little bit. And this is what I'm talking about. So I'm cleaning that off. And I found in the summertime, it's actually coming off a little easier now. It's a little cold in my shop right now. But in the summertime when it's hotter, sometimes that melts a little bit more. And actually I can see it though. It's still right on that edge. So I do like to make sure I clean all that off. There we go. So that looks good. All right. So now we're back to the next part, which is reassembling and lubricating, reassembling, and testing. So I'm done with these. I can take these hones out of the way for now. I'm going to get my parts back. I want my scissor lubricant, which is this stuff right here. It's an alcohol-based wax lubricant. I need my screw. I'm actually going to clean this one a tiny bit because it's got a bunch of just junk in there. So I'm going to hit it with some Goof Off household cleaner, which is great for wax and things. And there we go. So that's nice and cleaned. Get any gunk out of there, off. And then I can inspect the screw and the washer. Looks good. Doesn't have to be perfectly cleaned, but I like to get the majority of any junk off there. I'm not seeing anything wrong with that washer. It looks good. Looks intact. So we're going to install that. Now, like I said, the washer goes in the round side. So here's what I'm showing you. See round? And see how this one has a box in it? See the box side? So the screw goes in the round side. Then the box side goes over top and they go together. Then we're going to take our tensioning screw. I'm going to give these a quick little lubrication. Actually, I'm going to pull that off first and do a little lubrication in this area. I like to go down along the blade and on the screw. All right, now we're going to put that back together again. Okay, there we go. We are back together. Now I'm going to put my screw on. This screw is interesting because I think, if I remember, they look like they had it. This black part was on the outside. I just want to make sure I put this back together the way they had it. Now I am surprised, nor a lot of times these will have a little lock mechanism. But I guess that's what this black, I've never seen one so much like this before with the black like retaining thing. So the next thing you want to do before you cut with these is you want to, still, just to be sure, make sure the blades are separated. So don't tighten that tensioning screw all the way down. Push these down. So what I was doing was separating that blade, and now I'm going to squeeze it and open. So that way any burr there, I'm pulling it back, and I'm pushing these apart now so that they're not touching. I'm going to do that 2 times. Okay. And now these are ready to cut. And what I like to use first is a piece of, this is just 1-ply tissue, toilet tissue. And for the first cut, I'll do that. And I'll go a little bit, and then about half. Can you see? Hopefully you can see this. And halfway, and then a full cut. Make sure that's cutting nice and clean, and that looks good. And now I'm going to adjust the tension too. So when you drop these, they shouldn't slam all the way like that. They should stop just like that, just before closing, and that's pretty good. So that's about the right tension. Now, the next test I like to do is the wet tissue, one tissue. So I will take a piece of this 1-ply tissue, and I have this little mister, and I will wet this tissue with this mister. And I get it pretty good. It's really dry in here. There we go. All right, so now that's nice wet piece of tissue there. And now I want to see if it's cutting that clean. And I'm not going to give any cross pressure. I'm just literally going to go straight into the cut. I'm not applying, and that's a nice clean cut. I am not giving any angle pressure at all. And that's good. That's exactly what you want to see. And then my final one is, and you can get this from hairstylists or your barber, get some real human hair. So I like to get some real human hair. And the main thing I want to make sure here is that it's not pulling the hair. So I'll come up here and then I'll do my final test on human hair. Yeah, and that's cutting great. And that's good. And these are ready, these are good to go. So I'll just clean that little bit of hair off. I make sure I also tell my clients about sometimes it's supposed to, they say it's not seen, but you can say it. You see, that's the little wax on there. And I will tell my clients that when they see that they're not dirty, That is actual wax lubrication for scissors. So it's good. Just don't worry about that little streak if you see a little bit of a streak there. Um, that the great thing about wax lubrication is it doesn't attract dirt. So the best lubricant for scissors is, in my opinion, is wax, just like what Wolff Industry recommends that you use. The other thing you do want to check, make sure they're closing all the way, and these were fine. Yep, tip's fine. And that's it. These are done. So that is it. That is my method for doing salon and barber shears. And I hope that helped you out. If you got any questions, go ahead and put it in the comments.
So if you need some of the things that you saw in this video, like the hones and scissor wax and Ookami gold, I've put a lot of links to the items in the description in the video.